This evening, following the second assassination attempt of Donald Trump last week, we ask an expert how this will change the U.S. Secret Service, and are we living in an age of heightened threats against our political figures? Plus, the Federal Reserve aggressively slashed interest rates last week. What will this mean for Arizona's economy and the 2024 election? And finally, U.S. Senate candidate Kari Lake joins us. This is Before You Vote. Welcome. I'm Mike Broomhead. There is a second attempt on the former president's life, this time at a golf course in Florida, which brings more questions about the Secret Service and should there be changes. To talk about that is our resident expert, Steve Hooper. Over 30 years with the FBI. You were also with the Secret Service for a time, weren't you?
Yep.
So let's talk about what you've witnessed and what you heard in this press conference this week. Let's start with what happened on that golf course. Secret Service, or the acting director, interim director, said that what happened at the golf course was successful.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the issues that they are dealing with now is something that a lot of agencies, federal agencies, deal with, and that's this mentality of, well, this is the way we've always done it. Well, you've got to evolve with events. Events throughout our history have caused us to change laws, agencies. Look at 9/11. After 9/11, creation of new agencies, creation of a department, a whole new department, turning the FBI into a counterterrorism
Which
agency.
you were a part of.
Right. Oh, yeah. We lived it. We saw it. We were part of it. And then I became something I never thought I'd be, a counterterrorism agent. And so I think the Secret Service, when they say it was successful, there might have been a little luck involved there, right? Because it was successful because our normal procedures, Secret Service, is we have a team at the hole ahead of him, a team with him, and a team at the hole behind him. Well, it was the team at the hole ahead of him that this young agent turned and saw a rifle sticking through and took some action. So is that the best we got? Is that, you hope that someone sees the rifle sticking through the fence?
Well, especially with the amount of time we're hearing from his cell phone data, how much time he had spent there ahead.
Hours. Yeah. So, or should we be looking at this and going, you know what, there's probably a better way. But should they have been doing that for the last 10 years with the evolution of and the increase in rhetoric, the increase in violence in the communities, in social media? That's driving a lot of this craziness.
But you made a point to me about things that could be done immediately, that you don't have to go to the president. Alejandro Mayorkas being the head of Homeland Security. What should they be doing? I don't know if I want to go that strongly. What could they be doing to shore up this agency until all these other resources are brought in?
They could start by sitting down leadership and getting really smart people in the room and saying, okay, obviously the way we're doing it, it's not working. How can we move forward? How do we expand our footprint? And it could be something as simple as, let's reach out to other agencies and get them trained up. One thing we talked about is the FBI has their hostage rescue team. It's dozens of guys sitting at Quantico training, and they're high-end, high-speed guys. Maybe from now till November, you invite the FBI to throw their team at it and be your external security, your perimeter security. You know, it's time to make changes. Though what those changes are, you know, there's enough executive protection professionals around the country and in the government that could sit down and put this together. Again, after 9/11, it wasn't just the FBI sitting down saying, what can we do different? There were hundreds of people in meetings across the country putting together ideas as to how we can protect ourselves from a foreign terrorist organization. Well, the Secret Service could sit down with a bunch of smart people and say, okay, how can we do better at executive protection? What would it take?
And are there, like you talked about HRT, there's got to be availability of assets around the world that they could bring in and say, between now and November, we're going to have this many people everywhere. And it's not about not having enough people, is it?
No. They can get more people. It's about it, but they're myopic and they're thinking about within the Secret Service, we're struggling, we need more people, we need more money, we need all that.
Which may be true.
And that may be true. But that's 1-2 years down the road with fiscal budgets and so forth. How do we handle it for the next 2 months through this election and beyond? And that's what they have to look at. And there's one other thing that could have resolved a lot of this, and that's this process that has been long since established since 9/11, the incident command process. The incident command process is designed to handle things just like this. One of the comments that the acting director said today was that they did not have in their command post, they didn't have a Butler Police Department representative. That's Incident Command 101. The whole idea of a unified command is to have someone from every agency within the incident command.
So if the communication happens.
If that would have happened when they got on the radio and said, guy on the roof, the command post would have known it, and they could have taken immediate action. So incident command has been designed and redesigned by Department of Homeland Security, the home of the Secret Service. So had they used a proper incident command process, they could have resolved a lot of those programs that day.
I appreciate the time and the expertise. I really do. I wish we could talk about this for 2 days, but I appreciate the time. All right, now stay with us. What does the Federal Reserve bold interest rate cut mean for the Arizona economy and the 2024 presidential election? We'll be back in 60 seconds. All right, welcome back to Before You Vote. The big news that just came down is a 50 basis points reduction by the Fed in interest rates. To discuss it is Dr. Alexander Thiessen from Grand Canyon University. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much, Mike. I love the opportunity.
The big question for everybody is how is this going to and when is this going to affect the average consumer?
Well, the funny thing about things like the Fed decision here is that they already have. As much as the current decision matters, it's people's expectations of future decisions. And this choice by the Fed to finally lower interest rates after an extended period of rate hikes and then elevated interest rates, people have been pricing in this possibility of the Fed lowering interest rates for a long time. So mortgage rates, for example, have been dropping actually all year in anticipation of the Fed's move. So in some sense, consumers are already starting to feel this. So, yeah.
What do you read into the 50 basis points and not 25, the bigger jump than people had maybe expected? What does that say to you? What does that tell you in your world that this means from the Fed?
Well, in some sense, you can always think of the Fed as trying to weave this balance. They're balancing two risks. There's the risk to inflation, right, which is what they've been currently focused on. And what this 50 basis point versus 25 basis point cut is indicating is that they really are seeing the fight over inflation as behind them. They're really seeing this now as a chance to renormalize, get interest rates back to a more normal, neutral stance where they're not putting as much strain on the economy. And they're really indicating very strongly that they see that as the main goal for them going forward and less so inflation.
Is this also an indicator to the employers out there that to get the hiring going again? I mean, obviously, you're the economist here. It's the idea that you've got to have wage increases much higher than inflation for an extended period of time to get our quality of life back. Is that indicator, raising wages, keeping the job market strong?
Well, hopefully this is an indicator that we are starting to enter that mode where, again, interest rates have been at this elevated level for so long. Hopefully this is an indicator to employers that they can start to maybe plan for maybe expanding their business if you've been holding off on it. Again, if you're a home buyer, maybe looking at finally stepping into that market there. So this is more almost of an indicator of the zone that we're going to be entering, more even than a individual singular decision by the Fed.
What are the possible negatives of this? What are the bad things that can happen?
Well, there's always risks on anything, right? So what the Fed, as I said, what they're indicating is we think that the inflation boogeyman is essentially defeated. Well, we're still not back to that 2% target that the Fed is aiming at. So We don't know, right? Current indications are showing that we are still getting this slow return to normalcy on the inflation front, but that battle's not over either. And the Fed is going to have to be paying a lot of attention to all of the indicators that are coming in on both sides now, both on the too hot and too cold side.
Do you think we'll see another rate cut this year?
I think we will. However, I think almost certainly not before the election, for example. I think this was a strong statement by the Fed, and I think now at this point might be the time for them to be weighing, okay, how much do we want to keep the foot on the accelerator versus lifting it off?
Well, Dr. Thiessen, we appreciate the expertise because the average consumer wants to know how it's affecting them, and this was a great explanation of how that's going to work. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Mike.
All right, this is what everybody's talking about, and this is also going to play a role in the election. So make sure you're an informed voter and informed consumer. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. What sales tax are Arizona voters widely in favor of across the board? This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. This is our Tracking Arizona segment. This episode, we take up Prop 479. This is public transportation in Maricopa County. It encompasses roadways. It also is public transportation, buses, light rail. This is a half-cent sales tax. It used to be known as Prop 400. It's going to sunset in 2025 unless it's passed by the voters of the county. Joining us to talk about public sentiment towards 479 is, of course, our pollster from Noble Predictive Insights, Mike Noble. Welcome back, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Mike.
So let's talk about the numbers here. Classically, Republicans not really big fans of taxes, but this looks like it has support across the board.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We polled this actually 3 times over the last year or so, and you see support at its lowest end was in the high 50s, but then or in the mid 60s with the highest end. But opposition, interestingly enough, was very low every time we've had it, and overall it's 6 in 10 roughly of the electorate is in favor of it. And what's also really interesting is that it seems like the yes side has done a really good job of holding their ground and keeping it. You want to have ballot propositions around the high 50s if you want to be successful in November. But it seems like the opposition has struggled to, gain traction. It seems like so far in this issue.
Isn't it 2 things? In my mind, it's 2 things. Number one, even Republicans understand without public transportation and infrastructure, growth is stymied. But also, it's an existing tax that's just being extended. It's not a new tax.
Correct. I think that's a big difference on there. If this was a new tax, I think you'd see much different numbers. But since it's been an existing tax for many decades now, just continuing that on. And I think the electorate overall knows that Arizona is kind of really based on growth. Growth is pretty big. And also, if Maricopa County does pass this, it's huge because if you don't have these type of funds or investments going, the federal, when they're making these grants where they do matching funds over, they're not going to do it if you don't have it. So basically, it's a massive opportunity for Maricopa County to continue to have a really thriving business community if they land up approving this.
Yeah, and I also think that when we see the massive road projects that are going on, people understand that they're necessary here in town to support that growth. As always, Mike, I appreciate the insight into all of these items that we talk about.
Yeah, thanks again, Mike.
This is our Tracking Arizona segment. We'll be back here in a moment on Before You Vote. U.S. Senate candidate Kari Lake sits down with us next. Find out how she plans to handle the top issues affecting Arizona voters. This is Before You Vote. Welcome back to Before You Vote. Joining us now is Republican candidate for the United States Senate, Kari Lake. Thanks again.
Good to be here.
It seems like,
usually we're on the phone.
We are usually on the phone. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate you coming down to the studio.
No, thank you for putting this together. It's important that people know who they're voting for.
Yeah, and I think let's start there. Let's start with this Senate race because there is such a contrast between you and your opponent. Lay out for me the biggest issues in your mind that voters are concerned about and the difference in how you'd handle them.
Well, let's start with the border and the economy, because I think the two actually go hand in hand. We obviously have a wide open border here in Arizona. Everyone knows that. We've seen it. We've seen the thousands and thousands of people coming across our border, taking jobs, driving wages down. They're also causing crime in many cases. We know now that Venezuela has indeed emptied out prisons and insane asylums and are sending really dangerous people here. So that's a huge issue. It plays into the economy as well, because now we have 18 million people by some estimations who we have to compete with for housing and services. And they're driving down wages because they're willing to work for less. And of course they can, because the government's providing them housing. They're providing them debit cards with cash on them for groceries and things that they need at our expense. So those two go hand in hand. We got to turn around the economy and the border. We're going to do that starting on day one with President Trump in the office and in the Oval Office and me in the Senate. And we can't count on Ruben Gallego to do that. He's the reason why we have these problems. Remember, he called it the dumb, stupid border wall and said he would never, ever, ever put any money into it. Now he's going out and running 62 million in ads so far, him and his friends, trying to act like he cares about the border when he's done nothing except encourage an open border, support sanctuary cities, and vote for people here illegally to not only become permanent citizens, but have voting rights and be able to vote in this upcoming election. The American people don't want that. It'll be the end of America if we allow that. When it comes to the economy, really quickly, he voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. It should be the Inflation Production Act, because it actually caused the highest inflation that we've probably seen in our lifetimes. And that's the reason that nobody can afford anything. That's one of the reasons that we've seen rent prices almost double in some locations. Tucson, Mesa, and Phoenix have had one of the highest areas where the rent has gone up the most in the whole country. And this is one of the reasons people can't afford anything, and people are having to go to food banks now to get by because they don't have enough money just for the basics.
On the border issue, the frustration is, and I've played this on the radio show a number of times, just a few years ago, Chuck Schumer gave this speech about how we stop things, and he wouldn't even use the phrase undocumented because it said it proves the Senate's not serious about fixing the problem, and he's done a 180. So how do you work in that body to get enough people on board to get something done in the Senate? H.R. 2's been sitting in the Senate for a year and a half. How do you move that body along?
I'm glad you mentioned the semantics of it really quickly, because my opponent has done nothing for the border except push a piece of legislation that forbids the use of the word illegal alien, which is in most of our federal documents. That's how they've been referred to, aliens, undocumented aliens, illegal aliens. And that's what he cares about, changing the words we're allowed to use, censoring us from using words. He doesn't care about the open border. How would we do it? I believe that both Democrats and Republicans want to do something about it now. The policy that was put forth, the one that you called bipartisan, was a terrible border policy. Everybody who looked closely at it realized it was just going to codify and cement into law the terrible plan that we have right now, which is open borders for all. It was really, in my opinion, and many others, a disguised funding plan to send an additional $95 billion over to Ukraine, rolled up in a bill that was talking about our border. We want border security. We don't want it wrapped up. In order to give us border security in our country, we have to give another 115 billion away to start wars overseas. That's not what the American people want. We want a clean bill to fully fund the border wall. We're going to get that started on day one. Fully fund and expedite the construction of the border wall. And Mike, in order to save our country, we got to send these people who've poured in during the Biden invasion back to their homeland. If we want to save our homeland, they got to go back to their homeland. So we will start the largest repatriation operation and send people back to their homeland. These people are unvetted. We have more terrorists inside our own borders right now. I shouldn't even use the word border, because frankly, we don't have a border, inside our own country right now than we ever have. And we've seen what they're capable of by what happened on October 7th in Israel, which was the most barbaric thing I think I've ever seen in my life. Those same people are right here in our country. And Ruben Gallego's okay with that. This is a very clear election, just as it is for president. Do you want more of this nightmare situation, or do you want to get back to an America that we recognize, one where we have a strong economy for all Arizonans, all Americans, one where we have a secure border, where we know who's coming in, where we have legal immigration but not rampant illegal immigration, where we have strong schools, police that are supported, fully funded, and fully staffed so we can take on the crime that's soaring on our streets.
I always appreciate the time. I know you're very busy. I appreciate you laying things out for us, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, we'll be back here in just a moment. All of our past interviews are on cw7az.com/vote. Head over there for more information. We'll see you next Sunday right here on Before You Vote.